What was the very first word ever spoken by a human? Was it a cry for help, a whisper of love, or a warning shouted across the dark forests of prehistory? We may never know the exact sound, yet the mystery of our first language is one of the deepest riddles of human evolution. For hundreds of thousands of years, prehistoric humans wandered the savannas and icy tundras of the world. They faced saber-toothed predators, unforgiving climates, and the constant uncertainty of survival. But in the middle of this struggle, something extraordinary began to happen. Our ancestors started to shape raw sounds into symbols, and those symbols into meaning. From grunts and gestures grew the most powerful tool ever created: language. This was not just a tool of survival. It was a spark. Language transformed scattered tribes of hunters into cooperative societies. It allowed warnings to travel faster than danger itself, and stories to outlive the people who told them. With words, humans could share not only facts about where to find food, but also myths, dreams, and ideas about the cosmos. The birth of language may be the single most important turning point that set us apart from every other creature that walked the earth. And yet, despite its importance, its true origin remains hidden in the shadows of time. Did Neanderthals have their own words, whispered in caves lit by firelight? Did Homo erectus chant rhythms while hunting mammoths on the frozen plains of the Ice Age? Or did language appear suddenly, like a mysterious gift, only with modern Homo sapiens? Archaeology and anthropology are still piecing together this puzzle, and every discovery feels like a fragment of an ancient code waiting to be deciphered. In this documentary, we will travel deep into the past to uncover what archaeology, anthropology, and evolutionary science tell us about the birth of human language. We will explore the caves of our ancestors, the fossils of long-lost species, and the debates that divide scientists even today. Along the way, we'll confront questions that reach beyond science itself. Is language something we invented, or something that was always inside us, waiting to awaken? This is not just the story of words. It is the story of how humanity itself came to be. For without language, there would be no civilizations, no history, no memory of who we are. It is the thread that binds us across generations, the voice of the Ice Age hunter, the whisper of the Neanderthal mother, the cry of the child who saw the stars for the first time. Tonight we go back in time, to an age before writing, before cities, before recorded memory, to seek the real origin of human language, in the dark silence of prehistory.
If we want to understand the real origin of human language, we must first step into the world of archaeology and anthropology, the sciences that sift through the dust of ages to uncover fragments of our forgotten past. But here's the problem. Unlike bones, tools, or cave paintings, language leaves no fossil. It cannot be dug up from the ground or displayed in a museum. It vanishes with the breath that carries it. What survives are only traces, indirect clues left behind by prehistoric humans and their relatives. One of the first places scientists look for these traces is in anatomy. Language requires not just a clever brain, but also the right body to produce and shape sounds. Early species of humans, like Homo erectus, had smaller brains and less complex vocal tracts. Could they have spoken as we do? Some researchers argue they may have had the beginnings of communication, simple calls or chants, but not the full range of speech we know today. The story becomes more fascinating when we meet the Neanderthals. For a long time, they were portrayed as brutish and speechless, mere grunting cavemen. But discoveries over the past few decades have begun to challenge this stereotype. Fossil evidence shows that Neanderthals had hyoid tone, a small but crucial part of the throat involved in speech, almost identical to ours. Their ear bones suggest they could hear the same frequencies as modern humans. DNA analysis even reveals they carried a version of the FOPX2 gene strongly linked to language ability. If they had the biological capacity for speech, what words might they have spoken? But language is not just biology, it is also culture. Archaeological sites reveal symbolic behavior, often considered the fingerprint of language. Take, for example, the cave paintings of Chavot and Lascaux in France or Altamira in Spain. These are not just pictures of animals, they are stories frozen in stone, signs of minds that wanted to communicate across generations. Some researchers argue that such symbolic art could only have been created by people who already had language, because to imagine, to narrate, to represent the world requires words. Then there is Blombos Cave in South Africa, where archaeologists uncovered engraved ochre pieces dating back nearly 75,000 years. The scratches formed deliberate geometric patterns, evidence of abstract thought. Alongside them were tools for mixing paint, suggesting that prehistoric humans were not only communicating but also sharing meanings through art, possibly connected with ritual or teaching. These findings push us to consider a critical idea. Maybe language did not appear suddenly but evolved gradually alongside human culture. First came gestures, then simple sounds, then complex patterns. Imagine a group of Ice Age hunters coordinating a mammoth hunt, not with silence, not with random grunts, but with a set of calls, signals, and perhaps early words. Over time, those words expanded, shaped by survival, memory, and imagination. But debates rage fiercely among scientists. Some argue for the sudden mutation theory, that language was a spark, an instant revolution of the human mind. They believe a genetic leap, perhaps an FOPX2 or another brain-related gene, transformed us into the only species capable of true language. Others believe in the gradual evolution model, where communication grew step by step over hundreds of thousands of years, shared to some degree by Neanderthals, Denisovans, and maybe even earlier ancestors. Still, the trail is fragmented. We can find bones, tools, and cave art, but we cannot hear the voices of the past, and so we are left with questions. Did language evolve as a survival strategy, or did it arise from something deeper, an urge to share, to imagine, to connect? The importance of this mystery cannot be overstated, for in the silence before language, there were only scattered individuals. With language, there was society, story, and culture.
Picture this: the Ice Age. The world is colder, harsher, and more dangerous than anything we can imagine today. Vast glaciers crawled across the continents. Herds of mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses roamed the tundra. And in the middle of this frozen world, small bands of prehistoric humans struggled to survive. Imagine one such group, a cluster of men, women, and children huddled around a fire at dusk. Their faces are marked with soot, their bodies wrapped in animal hides. The fire crackles, throwing shadows onto the walls of a shallow cave. Tonight, they are not just silent figures, they are alive with voices. One hunter pointing toward the distant plains utters a sharp sound, a word perhaps, that signals bison. Another imitates the stampeding motion with his arms, reinforcing the meaning. Slowly, through shared experience, these sounds take root. A vocabulary is born. This is how many scientists believe language began, not in books or scripts, but in the raw urgency of survival. The need to coordinate a hunt, to warn of danger, to teach children which berries are safe and which are poisonous. Language was not luxury, it was survival. And survival demanded creativity. Now picture the hunt itself. The tribe moves silently across the snow. But silence alone will not be enough. As the mammoth herd begins to stir, one leader raises his hand and whispers a call. The sound spreads quickly among the hunters, a single signal that carries meaning far faster than gesture alone. Now. With a shout, the group rushes forward, spears raised. The mammoths scatter, but the coordinated attack succeeds. Tonight, the tribe will eat. And afterward, they will tell the story of the hunt, not with grunts, but with words, passed on to those too young to fight, etched into memory by rhythm and repetition. From here, language expands. It becomes more than practical. It becomes symbolic. Around the fire, children listen wide-eyed as elders recount tales of great beasts, of ancestors, of the stars above. These stories are not just entertainment. They are lessons, ways of transmitting knowledge across generations. In this moment, language becomes the thread of culture, the invisible web that holds the tribe together. Archaeological evidence supports this vision. In caves across Europe, scientists find not just art,
but also signs of repeated gatherings, fires, ochre pigments, carved tools. These were not random. They suggest ritual, teaching, shared meaning. To create ritual requires more than instinct. It requires words, a chant, a prayer, a repeated phrase. Language gave birth to belief. But language also shaped how humans thought. Without words, thought is fleeting, tied to immediate sensation. With words, thought becomes durable, structured, abstract. Imagine trying to plan a hunt days in advance without language, or trying to describe something that happened years ago, or trying to dream of something that does not yet exist. Language gave humans the ability to stretch beyond the present, to imagine the future, to learn from the past. Think of a child learning words today. At first, they point and grunt. Then they say, mama, fire, water. Soon, sentences appear. It's the same progression humanity itself once took. What we see in the first 2 years of a child's life is, in a way, a compressed version of what our species experienced over tens of thousands of years. From gesture to sound, from sound to meaning, from meaning to stories. The development of each child is like an echo of the development of our species. Even today, we see the deep connection between language and music. A lullaby, a chant, a national anthem, all are more than words. They are emotions carried on sound. And then there are the debates. Could Neanderthals have done this too? If they shared our genes for language, if they painted caves and buried their dead, did they also tell stories? Did they name the stars, the rivers, the animals they hunted? Or were they limited to cries and commands, forever locked out of the symbolic universe that humans eventually built? Many archaeologists argue Neanderthals must have had some form of language. How else could they have coordinated complex hunts, passed down tool-making skills, or cared for the sick and injured? Yet others insist their brains, while large, were wired differently, perhaps capable of communication, but not true language. This is where imagination must meet evidence. Picture two tribes, one of Homo sapiens, one of Neanderthals. They live near the same valley, hunt similar animals, face similar challenges. But one tribe can weave words into complex stories, creating myths that unite them, laws that govern them, plans that extend into the future. The other tribe communicates too, but perhaps in ways less flexible, less symbolic. Which tribe will survive longer, thrive, and expand? Perhaps this was the silent edge that allowed our ancestors to outlast their cousins. Language, then, was not just a tool, it was power. It gave prehistoric humans the ability to bind themselves into something larger than individuals. With words, they built not just tribes, but the foundations of civilizations yet to come. And so we return to the fire in the Ice Age cave. The flames flicker, shadows dance, voices rise. A child hears a story about the hunt, about the spirits of animals, about the stars above. That child remembers it and passes it on to their children. And in that moment, the true miracle of language reveals itself. It allows humans to escape the prison of time. With words, the dead speak to the living, and the living prepare the unborn. Language is memory made eternal.
If the story of language feels like a miracle, it is also one of the most hotly debated mysteries in science. Scholars from archaeology, linguistics, genetics, and anthropology have wrestled with the question for centuries. Where, when, and how did language truly begin? One school of thought, the sudden revolution theory, argues that language was born almost overnight, the result of a genetic mutation that transformed the human brain. Proponents of this view point to the FOXP2 gene, often nicknamed the language gene. Mutations in FOXP2 can cause severe speech and language disorders in modern humans. The discovery that both Homo sapiens and Neanderthals carried this gene suggests that the biological foundation for language was already ancient. But some scientists believe that a unique tweak in our lineage, perhaps only around 70 to 100,000 years ago, ignited the full capacity for speech and symbolic thought. This spark might have coincided with what archaeologists call the cognitive revolution,
Suddenly, humans were painting caves, creating art, and burying their dead with rituals. Was this the moment when words flooded into the world? Others reject the idea of a sudden leap. They argue instead for a gradual evolution model. Language, they say, was not a light switch, but a long, dimming dawn. Early hominins like Homo erectus may have developed proto-languages, systems of calls, gestures, and shared meanings. Over hundreds of thousands of years, these systems slowly became more complex. Imagine a child stacking blocks, one on top of another. Each block is simple, but together they form a tower. In the same way, communication evolved, piece by piece, until finally it became the tower of full human language. There is evidence for this. Even animals today show glimmers of linguistic ability. Vervet monkeys use distinct alarm calls for different predators, one for eagles, another for snakes, another for leopards. Prairie dogs chirp writings that encode details about the size, shape, and color of intruders. Dolphins and whales communicate with complex clicks and whistles, some of which seem unique to individuals, almost like names. If such abilities exist in the animal kingdom, why couldn't early humans have had similar, evolving systems that slowly blossomed into true speech? The debate intensifies when we look at archaeological evidence. At sites like Blombos Cave in South Africa, geometric engravings dating back 75,000 years hint at abstract thought. In Chauvet Cave in France, breathtaking paintings over 30,000 years old show that humans were not just describing reality, they were symbolizing it. Some scholars argue that such symbolic behavior could not exist without language. Others counter, perhaps art came first and language followed. Was language the parent of art or the child? And then there are the Neanderthals. Were they mute or did they speak? Their fossils suggest they had the anatomy for speech. They had the FOXP2 gene, they buried their dead, they may have even worn ornaments. All signs point to symbolic thought, yet no direct evidence, no written trace, no recorded sound survives. Some researchers believe Neanderthals had a form of language, but less flexible than ours. Perhaps they had words for objects and actions, but struggled with abstraction. For example, they might have said fire or hunt, but could they have said tomorrow or spirit? Without abstraction, language cannot leap into myth, law, and poetry. Could this limitation explain why Neanderthals disappeared while Homo sapiens endured? The mystery deepens with the gesture-first hypothesis. According to this theory, language began not with the tongue, but with the hands. Early humans may have relied heavily on gestures, pointing, miming, signaling, before sounds carried meaning. Even today, human communication is filled with gestures that cross cultures. Pointing to the sky, raising a hand to stop, mimicking eating, all are almost universal. Some scientists suggest that as our brains evolved and our vocal tracts adapted, these gestures were slowly replaced by words. Others argue that speech and gesture co-evolved, intertwining into the rich systems of communication we now know. But there are also more radical theories. Some researchers propose that language did not arise for survival at all, but for storytelling and social bonding. They argue that gossip, the sharing of information about who can be trusted, who betrayed whom, who leads, who follows, was the true fuel for language. This idea, known as the social grooming hypothesis, suggests that words replaced the physical grooming common among primates. Instead of picking lice from one another's fur, humans picked apart reputations with whispers and tales. In this view, language is less about hunting mammoths and more about holding society together. Others point to ritual and religion. Words, they argue, may have first been born in chants, songs, and prayers. Rhythm and music could bind groups, create shared identity, and pass on sacred traditions. Even today, much of our most powerful language is sung, recited, or repeated. Hymns, anthems, mantras, poems. Perhaps the first words were not commands or descriptions, but prayers. And yet, despite all these theories, unanswered questions remain. Why us and not them? Why did humans and not chimpanzees or dolphins or elephants develop full grammar, infinite vocabulary, and the ability to tell stories stretching across centuries? If Neanderthals had language, why did it not save them? If Homo erectus communicated, why did their words not evolve into writing, cities, and civilizations? Some scholars whisper about an even darker possibility, that language was not purely a gift, but also a burden. Words allowed humans to imagine not just the hunt, but death. Not just survival, but meaning. Language gave us gods and myths, but also lies and wars. Perhaps Neanderthals did not vanish because they lacked language, but because they were spared the double-edged sword of it. Whatever the truth, one fact is clear. The origin of language remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in science. Fossils give us bones, art gives us images, but the first word, whether whispered, sung, or shouted, vanished into the Ice Age wind. All we can do is imagine, debate, and piece together the fragments of evidence. And so we are left with haunting questions. Was the first true word a cry of love or of fear? Was it spoken by Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, or some forgotten cousin of humanity? Did it rise slowly, like a dawn, or blaze suddenly like a spark in the night? We may never know the exact answer, but perhaps the mystery itself tells us something. For as long as humans wonder about their past, language will live on, carrying the echoes of our prehistoric ancestors.
The origin of human language is not just a riddle of the past, it is a mirror for our present and a compass for our future. If language truly emerged in the firelight of prehistoric caves, born from the need to survive, cooperate, and dream, then what does that say about who we are today? Let's pause for a moment and imagine. What if our ancestors had never spoken? If the hunters of the Ice Age had only gestures and grunts, never words, how far could they have gone? Could they have planned a hunt weeks in advance, teaching children not just how to throw a spear, but also why they must do it in a certain way? Could they have remembered the dangers of winter or the stars that guided them without names and stories? Without words, there would be no myths, no religions, no laws, no civilizations. Humanity as we know it would never have existed. And so, the first lesson we can draw from this mystery is this: language is survival, not in the simple sense of finding food, but in the deeper sense of transmitting knowledge across generations. Every proverb, every story told by grandparents to grandchildren is a thread in the same tapestry that began when prehistoric humans named their first fires, rivers, and stars. When we teach, when we share, when we write, we are participating in the same act that allowed our ancestors to endure the Ice Age and build the first societies. The second lesson is this: language is power. Words do not just describe reality, they shape it. Think of the way a leader's speech can move millions, or a simple promise can bind two people together for life. Prehistoric humans likely understood this instinctively. A chant before the hunt could give courage. A story about spirits could give meaning to suffering. Today, the same truth remains. Words can heal or wound, unite or divide, build nations or destroy them. When we speak, we are wielding the most ancient tool of humanity, older than the plow, older than the wheel, older than writing itself. But language is also fragile. Just as languages were born, they can die. Linguists estimate that nearly half of the world's current languages may vanish within the next century. Each one carries unique ways of seeing the world, unique metaphors, unique wisdom. When a language disappears, it is like losing a prehistoric cave painting forever erased. Reflecting on the origin of language reminds us to protect and value the diversity of tongues spoken across the globe, for they are living fossils of humanity's creativity. The third lesson is perhaps the most profound. Language is memory and imagination combined. Our ancestors may have invented words to warn of predators or describe tools, but once words existed, they allowed for something greater: memory that outlives the moment, imagination that transcends the present. Around prehistoric fires, humans told stories of ancestors long gone and spirits never seen. They created myths to explain the stars and the wind. They imagined what lay beyond the mountains, the oceans, the night sky. Without language, there is no before or after, only the immediate present. With language, time itself is conquered. And so, when we ask about the origin of language, we are also asking about the origin of our humanity. To speak is to remember. To speak is to imagine. To speak is to be human. This reflection also forces us to confront a sobering reality, the double-edged sword of language. Our prehistoric ancestors may have used words to unite their tribes, but words have also been used to divide humanity. Myths that inspired courage could also justify violence. Stories that built civilizations could also enforce oppression. In every era, from the Ice Age to today, language has been both tool and weapon. It is worth asking, are we, in our modern age of digital communication, using language to connect or to fragment, to share truth or to spread lies, to build bridges or to burn them? There is also something deeply humbling here. The first word, whatever it was, has been lost forever. But its legacy lives in every sentence we speak. When a mother sings to her child, when a poet writes a verse, when a scientist names a new discovery, they are continuing a journey that began perhaps 100,000 years ago in the dark silence of a cave. That journey has no end. Language is not fixed. It evolves, adapts, mutates. New words are born every day while old ones fall into silence. The process that began with Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo sapiens continues with us. Perhaps the greatest reflection is this: language is the bridge between the past and the future. Without it, we would not know our ancestors. With it, we can leave a trace for those yet unborn. Prehistoric humans may have spoken to remember the hunt. We speak to remember who we are. They may have named the stars to find their way home. We name the stars to dream of reaching them. So what can we learn from the origin of language in our daily lives? That every word matters. That every conversation carries the weight of millennia. That when we choose to speak truth instead of lies, kindness instead of cruelty, curiosity instead of ignorance, we are honoring the same force that allowed our species to survive the Ice Age and outlast the Neanderthals. Next time you tell a story, remember this: you are not just entertaining, you are not just speaking. You are participating in the oldest act of humanity, the same act that allowed a fragile species on the African savannas to rise, endure, and eventually create civilizations. Language is our inheritance and our responsibility.
From the moment the first sound carried meaning, humanity was forever changed. In the silence of prehistory, language rose like a spark against the dark, transforming scattered tribes of hunters into storytellers, builders, and dreamers. We have followed the trail through fossils, caves, and genetic codes. We have glimpsed Neanderthals shaping tools and Homo sapiens painting on stone walls. We have considered the debates. Was language born suddenly, like a lightning strike, or did it evolve slowly, like dawn spreading across the horizon? Was it first a whisper, a chant, a prayer, or a cry for survival in the Ice Age wilderness? The truth remains hidden. We may never know the exact word that began it all, yet we can feel its power in every syllable we speak today. Language is survival, memory, imagination, and power. It is the invisible thread connecting us to those who came before. When a child learns their first words, they are not just entering the modern world, they are echoing the very first voices of prehistoric humans who named fire, water, and sky. And so we are left with a question. Do we really know everything about our ancestors? Or is language itself still holding secrets we have yet to uncover? Clues buried not in bones or stones, but in the very structure of the words we speak. What is certain is this: without language, there would be no history, no myths, no civilizations. Without language, we would not be here, asking questions about who we are. As we end this journey, take a moment to reflect. Every story you tell, every idea you share is part of the same human legacy that began tens of thousands of years ago. When you speak, you are carrying forward the voice of humanity itself. And if you've stayed with us through this exploration, you are now part of that story too. So we ask you, what do you believe was the first human word? Was it love, Fear, hunger, or something else entirely? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this journey into prehistory moved you, remember to like this video, subscribe, and join us again as we uncover the next great mystery of our shared human past. Because the story of humanity is not finished, and every word we speak carries it forward.